Bigfoot wars, angelic protection, and Trump on aliens. All of that. Plus, we are going to be looking at passages from Job and the book of Enoch. We're going to start a new series on that. From the new Defender Bible, which just came in, limited edition. You can get yours at the Skywatch TV store. All of that and more coming up on today's episode of Josh Peck Disclosure Weekly. All right, welcome to JPD Weekly. I hope you are all doing well. In case you haven't noticed, I'm still confined to the upstairs of my house. So my studio is in the basement. I've had a knee injury. I'm going to need surgery, but it's okay. It's not as bad as it could have been. Everything's good. Thank you all for the prayers and encouragement. But for at least a little while, I'm going to be doing the episodes and the daily videos from up here. Hopefully not any longer than need be, but that just means we have to make the shows extra interesting with extra interesting stories and things like that. And that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be talking about the book of Enoch and the book of Job, because I think these are two really interesting books, but it all comes from the new Defender limited edition King James version of the Bible with extended or expanded Apocrypha, which is a really cool product. It's, again, limited edition. There's not many of these that are going to be printed. If you want your own, head on over to skywatchtvstore.com. Look for the Handmaiden's Conspiracy package. It's the only way you can get it. The package itself is only like $29.95. This Bible alone, if you had to buy it retail, even with the discount, it'd probably be $60 or $70. So some people are like, well, I don't want all the extra books. Yeah, but you're getting you're really getting this for free when you get the books. So just if you don't want the other books, give them to your friends. But you should get the other books anyway because they're really well written and phenomenally researched and could really do a lot of good. Okay, we have some really interesting stuff today, and we'll get into the Defender Bible stuff later. And I picked the book of Job and Enoch for specific reasons that we'll talk about a little bit later. But first, have you heard of the whole Roanoke colony mystery? It's a big American mystery that's been it has not been solved clearly. But scientists are actually planning to take a fresh look on an engraved rock that's been purported to hold the key to this mysterious lost colony of Roanoke. So this has been described as the coldest case in American history. The fate of more than 100 English settlers of the 16th century on Roanoke Island, North Carolina, has long baffled historians. The settlers' disappearance has been shrouded in mystery for centuries. So the settlers, who included women and children, they arrived on Roanoke Island in 1587 to help establish America's first English settlement. By 1590, however, the group was nowhere to be found, which fueled an ongoing speculation about their mysterious disappearance. And the only clues that left behind by the settlers were the words Croatoan and CRO carved in a fort's gatepost on a tree nearby. And this sparked a theory that the settlers fled 50 miles south to Hatteras Island, which was then known as Croatoan Island. However, in 1937, a 21-pound stone engraved with strange markings was found by a California man driving in coastal North Carolina. And initially, this was taken to the history department of Emory University, and the stone ended up in possession of Brownell University in Gainesville, Georgia. The stone is supposedly engraved with a message from one of the colonists, Eleanor White Dare, to her father, John White, who was the colony's governor. And White had returned to England in 1587 to help to request help for the colony. But on his return to Roanoke Island 3 years later, he was unable to find any of the settlers, which by that time included his granddaughter, Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the New World. So this is what the engraving explains. And again, this engraving is written 16th century English. So it says, quote, Virginia went hence unto heaven 1591. Father, soon after you go for England, we came hither, end quote. Now it notes on the reverse side of the stone, adding that, quote, onlie, misery, and war, end quote, resulted in the death of more than half the settlers. So the engraving indicates that the remaining colonists were killed by savages At that time, it was spelled salvages, but they were killed by savages, except for 7 of them who were taken captive. And the tourist who found the stone said that he discovered it about 50 miles inland from Roanoke Island, and that was according to National Geographic. So this corresponds with White's account that the settlers had planned to move 50 miles into the Maine. So while initially hailed as a major historical find, questions soon arose about the authenticity of this stone, and more than 40 other engraved stones that subsequently surfaced were purchased by Brenau University. The majority of those so-called dare stones were widely acknowledged to be fakes, but the first stone, which supposedly bears a message from Eleanor White Dare, continues to fascinate historians. Now, National Geographic reports that analysis of the stone by University of North Carolina at Asheville in 2016 revealed that its interior was bright white, while its exterior and carvings were much darker. Matthew Champion of UK's Norfolk Medieval Graffiti Survey told National Geographic that a freshly cut inscription, quote, would appear bright white on the stone, particularly so on this type of stone, and it takes a great deal of time for that whiteness to fade, end quote. Using chemicals to mask the color would have been difficult in the 1930s, according to Champion and Ed Schrader, who's the president of Brenau. And new technology for spotting trace elements and isotopes, as well as ultraviolet and multispectral photography, could also unlock the mysterious stone's secrets. And that's what Eric Doehne, Doehne, not sure how to pronounce it, Doney, he's a Los Angeles art conservator, but that's what he told National Geographic, that with further study, could come up with some new information. So while some experts are still skeptical about the stone's authenticity, Brenau's Schrader is said to be planning a comprehensive study of the artifact in the near future. And Brenau has not yet responded to a request for comment on this story, at least not to Fox News. So we'll have to keep our eye on it and see. But, you know, as always, I'm curious to know what you think about the Roanoke colony mystery. Do you think that they were killed off, or do you think they left? Was it aliens? was it Bigfoot? That actually is something we're going to talk about a little bit later. The Bigfoot War. We'll get into that. But now this is interesting. This Dyson sphere star. It's been dubbed the most mysterious star in the universe, and the latest research does nothing to change that. Now, this has been in the forefront of a lot of like weird sites, maybe conspiratorial, but even some more scientific sites, wondering what this thing is. And it's been talked about for a couple of years now. But astronomers using small telescopes around the world are unearthing clues to an enigma that was once dubbed the most mysterious star in the galaxy. The star's official name, which is we talked about on this channel before, they're really, really good with names. KIC 8462852. So you shouldn't have any problem remembering that. It's really catchy, but it's better known as Tabby's star. So you could actually remember that Tabby's star, in honor of its discoverer, Tabitha. Man, I'm glad they used her first name, because the last name, what a mess. Boyagian, Boyayan. I don't know, but Tabitha, who's now a professor at Louisiana State University. So Tabitha's star is bright enough to appear on many star photos, but it was only recently, after it happened to be in the field of view of the Kepler Space Telescope, that it came to prominence. And Kepler was designed to study brightness fluctuations in 150,000 different stars, hoping to spot the silhouettes of planets passing in front of them. But in the process, it found a number of other astronomical oddities, of which the oddest of all is the Tabby star. So an otherwise ordinary star, it's about 50% bigger than our sun. Its brightness can change by as much as 20%, seemingly at random. But studies of Old images of it have revealed that in addition to these short-term flickers, its brightness has also been undergoing a long-run change since at least the 1890s. At one time, scientists were seriously considering the possibility that our view was being obstructed by a swarm of alien artifacts, such as like a fleet of giant solar collectors milling around it to provide power to an extraterrestrial civilization. But today, the cause is believed to be natural. So in a pair of presentations in a recent meeting of the American Astronomical Society in Denver, Colorado, two teams of scientists, including a high school student using a 70-centimeter telescope at the Thatcher School in California, have found evidence that the obscuring material is actually dust drifting between us and the star in tendrils of varying thickness. So here's a quote from Eva Bodman, a postdoctoral researcher at Arizona State University in Tempe, who was part of one of the teams. Quote, the size range of the particles is comparable to smoke particles from a campfire, so this dust is more like a misty cloud than the dust you find in your home, end quote. So what's interesting, says Bodman and these two high school students from the Thatcher School who helped monitor the star for 135 nights in spring and summer of 2017, is the degree to which the star's dimming in four major events in May, June, August, and September varied with the wavelength of the light coming from it. So if all wavelengths are affected similarly, it means that whatever is blocking the light is composed of large particles. So in principle, these could be the once postulated swarm of alien solar collectors, but more likely they would just be larger grains of dust. But it's still kind of cool to think about. But if the blue light and red light are blocked to different degrees, now that's a clue to the size of the particles obscuring our view. And the size of those particles can be estimated by comparing how they affect red and blue light. So Bodman explains, we do that, quote, we do that by comparing our models of light, of how light interacts with dust of various sizes, end quote. So based on this, it appears that the dimming of Tabby's star comes not from large objects like swarms of asteroids, comets, or, extraterrestrial constructs of some sort like solar collectors or a Dyson sphere or something, but probably from drifting bands of dust particles. But of course, like any good mystery, that's not the whole story. It's not as simple as that. Each of the four dimming events observed in 2017 affected red and blue light differently, suggesting that they involved dust particles of different sizes. And the long-term brightness change appeared to be associated with much larger grains. So Bodman's quoted as saying, quote, so the dust cloud is extremely complex. Each dip is a different kind of dust. What we're seeing is different parts of the dust cloud as they pass in front of the star. We don't know what's happening. Oh, this is a different person, excuse me. So end quote, the source of the dust remains a mystery. Alejandro Wilcox has said, quote, we don't know what's happening. For all we know, there could be microscopic aliens, but realistically, we're not sure whether it's really close to the system or far away. It could be closer to us than to the Tabby star, or it could be closer to the star, end quote. Now, Bodman doesn't disagree, but opts for it being something close to the star rather than a drifting interstellar cloud. She says that she thinks it would be more clumpy if it's going around the star. But if so, she says that that means that the tiny particles associated with the short-term dips would be so close to the star that they would be blown away by stellar winds within a few years. And the fact that they're there to be seen means that they must have been created very recently. So meanwhile, astronomers are keeping alert for whatever happens next. Yao Yin, who's another student from the Thatcher team, is quoted as saying, quote, more than 100 astronomers around the world are monitoring the star regularly. If a significant dip happens, we will be able to capture it immediately. Now, also important is to look for similar stars. So Tabby star was discovered only because its brightness changes were seen by Kepler, which surveyed just a tiny fraction of the sky. So that leaves us to wonder, will upcoming sky surveys find additional objects like that? The smart money appears to lie on yes. And actually, Robert Stenzel, a professor of astronomy at the University of Denver, who declined to give further details, has only gone on record to say they already have. And whatever that means, we'll have to stay tuned and find out. But perhaps even before its mysteries are fully unraveled, Tabby Star will be unseated as the most mysterious star in the galaxy. So what do you think this is? My bet is it's probably just dust. I think a way a lot of these magazines will, or like online articles and stuff, that they'll get articles, or they'll get further traffic to their advertisements, is they'll put a catchy title on, they'll put a catchy headline on, and say, "Oh, it's the most mysterious object in the world," and it's probably just dust. But it is kind of interesting, just the what if questions. What if it is something else? What could it be? What are your thoughts? I'd love to know. Leave me a comment in the comment section below. Have you heard of the strange case of the Human-Bigfoot War of 1855? I think before recently, I heard a little bit about it. Something about that sounds familiar, but I didn't really know much about it. Not saying I do now. I mean, I think that I don't know. When it comes to Bigfoot and a lot of things, I kind of live in the world between what if and it's probably not that. It's no way. Skepticism. I'm like Mulder from X-Files. I really want to believe, but I'm also kind of skeptical, like Scully. That's part of what made that show so good, was that just really good dynamic between the two characters. I think I'm sort of in between there. But the stuff is still interesting. I still find a lot of interest in it, even just as a story. I think it's a cool story. But again, I like wondering about the what if questions. What if this is actually true? What if this actually happened? What if something like this happened today? But anyway, so I want to talk about it because of that, because it is so interesting. Not saying I fully buy into any of it, but at the very least, it's an interesting story. So within the world of cryptozoology, there's perhaps no other there's no other mysterious creature that's even worth noting that's as widely talked about and discussed other than Bigfoot, Sasquatch. And this massive ape-like wild man has become synonymous with the world of cryptids, and have produced countless weird tales that range from somewhat plausible to other things that are just completely insane. And I got to say, I do have a lot of respect for the cryptozoologists. J.C. Johnson was a good friend of mine. He passed away, which is unfortunate. I was glad to have been able to interview him before he died. But he was a great guy. A certain level of respect has to go out to these people who are willing to put up with all the scrutiny and everything for something that they can't really conclusively say objectively is true. If they're able to say that, there wouldn't be any. It'd be like trying to convince somebody that like a bluegill or a robin is true. It's just objectively true. The cryptozoology is totally different. It could be true. With some things, it might even be likely, but that's as far as we can really take it. So I got a lot of respect for those people. Not saying that I necessarily agree with everything, but I still think it's really interesting. That's why I like stories like this. It's kind of like aliens. I don't know that I necessarily believe that there's life out there in the universe besides us, but it's interesting to think about. If there is, what would it be like? How would their psychology differ from ours? That kind of stuff. I just think is really interesting. So hovering here in the realm of the latter is a case that some people would say that they're embarrassed to say that they only recently stumbled across, such as myself, this one, but which personally struck me with a spectacular imagery and near absurdity. Now, this comes from Mysterious Universe, and part of this article, the author is talking about his experience with it, but I can track along a lot of this. You know what? I think, if I remember right, was it Mysterious Universe? You guys will have to tell me. I don't want to disparage their name in case it wasn't, but I think it was Mysterious Universe had a podcast that totally just trashed me and Tom Horn's book Abaddon Ascending, and we're just tearing it to shreds and ripping on it and making fun of it. I think it was Mysterious Universe, but I don't remember for sure. If somebody will have to tell me, in which case, they can do that. They're totally free to do that. Doesn't mean I have to love it, but I wasn't able to listen to the podcast though, because I guess you have to pay in order to get it, and I didn't want to spend any money hearing somebody bash me, but I heard from somebody else that was the case. Don't know if it's true, but it's interesting. But at least with this, I can track along with some of this. This writer goes on to say, in a very intriguing and historical oddity, there's been reports of an actual war between humans and Bigfoot, which seems to have been mostly forgotten, yet in some circles it's talked about a lot, which, it sounds insane, but we may as well take a look because it's still interesting. So this weird account begins in 1855 in the region of present U.S. states of Oklahoma and Arkansas. That's kind of close to me. I live in Missouri, but where the once mighty Choctaw Nation of Native Americans once ruled all over all they saw. And in this year, there was an apparent scourge of unseen bandits that were venturing forth from the wilderness to steal vegetables and even livestock sometimes. And now this might have been the end of it if it weren't for the claim that the trespassers were said to have soon graduated to kidnapping people, mostly children, which provoked a fierce reaction in the tribe. Now, a search party was allegedly formed and was composed of a group of uncommonly large cavalry warriors called light horsemen, the largest of whom was the towering Hamas Tubi and his 6 sons, who were widely reported as standing around 7 feet or more in height. So these giants, these real giants, along with a contingent of 30 other very large and fierce horseback riding warriors, headed out, led by part French, part Choctaw general by the name of Joshua Lafleur. And their mission was to find the culprits, put an end to the rain, and just take care of the problem. So as they headed out into the wilderness in the early morning hours from the tribal capital in Tusculoma, fully armed with high-powered rifles and pistols and thirsty for vengeance, these menacing, proud warriors no doubt thought that this would be a simple matter of routing some ragtag group of bandits, but they were in for quite a bizarre surprise, to say the least. So the group of warriors penetrated deep into the region, which is now known as the McCurtain County Wilderness area of present-day Oklahoma, and after 8 hours of riding nonstop through the blazing June sun, they stopped at a spot near the Clover River to rest and eat before remounting and continuing on the last leg of their tiring journey. And it was after nearly 14 hours of almost nonstop riding that the men reached the area where the bandits were said to be most active. And it was here that Lafleur suddenly gave the order to halt, as if he had seen something that caught his attention. So using a crude telescope, Lafleur peered off into the distance as the men rumbled amongst themselves and the horses huffed and chuffed. The general claimed that he could see something moving about ahead and voiced his confidence that it was the enemy, whoever the enemy was, before putting the telescope aside and giving the warriors the order to charge. So the massive, bloodthirsty warriors, they must have been quite a sight as they howled and rushed their horses through the trees in a mad dash into battle, weapons drawn, ready to fight. Yet in their powerful drive forward, this was soon brought to a halt when the unbearable stench of decay hit them like a wall, and their steeds began to inexplicably buck and rear in an abrupt, profound panic, knocking several of them into the mossy ground to writhe around, hacking and coughing, because that's how bad the stench apparently was. Some of the warriors, including the Tubies and Lafleur himself, were allegedly able to control their animals and advance past this nauseating wave of rotten stink to rush towards the bandits. And as they exploded out into a forest clearing, the sources of this terrible stench was clear. There, in the center of the clearing, they found what was described as some sort of earthen mound that had embedded within it and strewn about it numerous corpses in varying levels of decomposition, drawing a fog of flies that droned all about the startled warriors. Of human bandits, there was no sign, but looming nearby were 3 enormous ape-like creatures covered in hair, so tall as to dwarf even the most statuesque of the Tubies themselves. These beast men purportedly stood there glaring in their direction, completely unafraid of these tribal warriors. Now, what purportedly followed next is just as dramatic as any over-the-top action movie or science fiction movie. Lafleur is said to have charged the strange beast without hesitation, pistol and saber in hand, howling the whole time. One of the creatures stepped forward and lashed out with a massive hand to swat the general's horse to the side of its head with a thunderous blow that sent it sprawling to the ground dead. Lafleur was ejected to the ground, but was soon on his feet with his pistol blazing, managing to hit the wild man several times, but barely slowing it down at all. Even after sustaining several gunshot wounds, it barely bled, and it seemed to not even feel it, and it lunged forward to grab the man by the head and rip it clean off. So all of this had happened before the others had even had any time to react. nor indeed even process the situation at all. And they had witnessed it in a wide-eyed stupor. Upon seeing their general slump to the ground without a head, is this vicious ape-like creature loomed across over his carcass, they produced their rifles and launched a withering volley of bullets at these monsters, which managed to drop all but one of them. The grievously injured creature supposedly limped off in a bid to escape, but was set upon by one of the Tubi's brothers, who pounced and apparently cut its head off with a hunting knife. Now, in the aftermath, it was just a few scattered native warriors poised and ready for the next attack that would never come, and the smell of gun smoke and that terrible stench of dead bodies lingered all around them. And in the background, that Tubi brother crouched over the hulking beast with blood on his knife and hands. The natives then went about the grim work of burying the dead, finding the bodies of at least 19 children among them, and the bodies of the hulking beast were burned on a bonfire. So it's without a doubt harrowing, and it's a terrifying tale filled with, you know, mysteries and monsters and other otherworldly bizarreness. And the tale has been passed around the internet quite a bit. And if it seems too good, if it seems too good to be true, then it's because maybe it is. You know, a lot of these stories will get exaggerated over time. That can happen. But again, maybe not. So the tales do incorporate various historical facts. LaFleur seems to have indeed been a real person who did die in 1855, and the Tubis were apparently real as well, but this means little in the larger picture, as any historical figure can be inserted into any wild story that you like, sort of like a fan fiction. And of course, not helping matters is that while the story has made the rounds on the internet, the best source that apparently anyone has been able to find to truly link it back is a book in a rather unwieldy title of True Bigfoot Horror, the Apex Predator, Monster in the Woods, Cryptozoology, Terrifying, Violent, and True Encounters of Sasquatch Hunting People. And this was by Jeremy Kelly, which seems to have just a collection of unconfirmed Bigfoot anecdotes, as well as reviews that aren't really all that kind. So, again, it's an interesting story, but there's not a whole lot to link it into reality. Doesn't mean it's totally false, but it's hard to say that it's true too. It's really hard to say that. So I regard it as a really interesting story. It's a cool story, but I wouldn't regard it as true without some sort of objective proof instead of just anecdotal evidence or something like that. But hey, what do you guys think? Do you guys have any of you out there found any sources for this that is actually rooted in history? Because that would be interesting to see. And what do you think of just the Bigfoot question in general? Do you think there is some kind of animal out there? Is it part man, part beast? Is it something demonic? Is it something alien? Is it something interdimensional? So I'm interested to know what you think. Leave me a comment in the comment section below. Moving on, there's a theory that's been making the rounds that extraterrestrials, or what we think of as ET, and might actually be artificial intelligence. So in the search for extraterrestrial life, we have a problem. It's a 10 billion-year-old galaxy from what the scientists say. I mean, Christians are split on that issue. Some go for like an old Earth, old universe. Some go for a more young Earth, young universe. But, let's just say at least just from what science says, or at least the interpretation of science. I don't even want to say objective science exactly, because there's objective science that could be interpreted to show a young Earth as well. So it's an interesting question, but it kind of goes outside of what this story is all about. But just in this very large, apparently old, who knows how old, galaxy, now there should have been ample opportunity for at least one species to escape its own mess and to spread across the stars, filling every niche. Or every niche, but that the species doesn't seem to have come calling leads to Fermi's paradox. If life isn't impossibly rare, Where is everyone? Efforts to scan the skies for signs of intelligent life have come up blank, which adds to the puzzle. And maybe vast gulfs of interstellar space and the narrow windows of time for communicative species to exist within shouting distance of one another are to blame. That's something scientists have looked at. Intelligences might be like small ships passing in the night in a vast ocean. Actual close encounters of any kind could be exceedingly unusual. Now, me and Derek Gilbert wrote about this in our book, The Day the Earth Stands Still, which if you haven't had a chance to check it out, you should. It's available at skywatchtvstore.com. It's also Amazon and all that. But if you get it actually, go to joshpeckdisclosure.com. I have all the links there. It's available in some packages that Amazon doesn't offer, where you get some really cool stuff that's not available anywhere else, not available on Amazon or anywhere else. So you should check that out. Now, another explanation for this great silence of the galaxy is that any surviving intelligence out there is so different from us, so radically different that we can't even conceive of its forms or behaviors. As a consequence, actually detecting and recognizing it could be next to impossible. And that's a bit of a downer, but that's something I've been thinking about lately too. I've been looking more into human psychology. I find it interesting. And the way that we perceive the world, the way we look at the world, the way we focus on the world, is really strange. It's a lot different than what we would normally think. And I don't know if there was another species out there that they would view the world in the same way. With humans, most of our cognitive efforts are used to ignore things, simplify things. And this is done unconsciously. So right now, if you're watching me on a computer or on a TV, but you're ignoring the fact that or on a cell phone, you're ignoring the fact that what you're viewing me on is not just one object. It's not just one thing. It's an unbelievably complex system of motherboards and wires and electricity, and there's a lot of quantum forces involved, most of which we probably don't even know about yet, but even just the electronics in there. It's easy for us to ignore that complexity because we just have one thing, a phone or a computer. Now, what's interesting is when it breaks, then we realize how unbelievably complex it is. Because when your phone breaks, all of a sudden, it's not just this one thing anymore, this one object that you can look at that has one function, whichever the thing is that you're doing at that time. Now it has automatically transformed, from your perspective, into an unbelievably complex machine that you don't understand. You don't know how it works. And now you have to deal with, how am I going to fix this thing? Do I take it in? Am I going to have to pay a bunch of money? And it's a source of anxiety now. So it's just interesting that most of the way that human beings think is we ignore things and we simplify things in order to just get along in the world. So that's interesting. I don't know if that's unique to humans or if there was some type of race out there, if it would be the same, if God created some other race out there, if it would be the same. And even along those lines, let's say there's no extraterrestrial life. I don't know if angels are like that. I don't know if spiritual beings are like that. Maybe they're like us, but they can focus in on a little bit more. Maybe they can see more complexity than we do. Or maybe it's the opposite for them. Maybe the default setting is that they do see the complexity, and maybe it's hard for them to just see the one thing. I don't know. It's interesting to think about, though. I've been looking into that lately, but so that kind of lends itself to the ET question, though. If they could be so vastly different from us, we wouldn't even know how to relate to one another. But there's also a possibility that lies between these extremes, and it might be probable. So when our first encounter or detection, if it ever does occur, it could be a machine intelligence that appears in our sights rather than something biological. Now, this idea is not actually new. Back in the 1940s, the mathematician John von Neumann explored the possibilities of non-biological self-replicating systems steeped in computation, but requiring no operating mind. And later on in the 1980s, others expanded on this concept by considering the real engineering needs for autonomous, replicating, spacefaring devices. And these machines would be able to roam the universe, finding raw materials to build more and more of themselves, creating the infrastructure for energy from space or human settlement among the stars. And it would require a more complex mission still for such devices to have true artificial intelligence. Now, what would that purpose be, and what kind of AI is such a machine likely to have? That's the question. An encounter with an alien machine could help us unravel this puzzle, but it could also be even more different than a biological sentient species. Now, one possibility is that this machine could be super capable, exceeding our human capacity for cognitive or analytical tasks. So such an artificial intelligence might be exceedingly hard to understand, either in terms of its underlying motivation or because of practical barriers of communication bandwidth. So for this device, talking to us might be like talking to an infant, or trying to discuss, the collected work of Shakespeare using nothing but pictographs. An alien system optimized for processing vast data streams might not even be able to downgrade its pace enough to notice that we're even trying to talk, whether we use technology or not. So an extraterrestrial AI could also be seriously intimidating and scary to us simply because of its machine nature. A thing animated from non-living pieces, just like, a classic tale of the golem. Molded from clay or mud in ancient Hebrew stories. But by comparison, while a biological alien might be shocking, it would have at least some traits in common with us, most likely, if it's biological. So we could convince ourselves that God created it, or there's something recognizable about it. Or even sympathetic behaviors and intentions might be recognizable. But an artificial entity doesn't need to follow any of those rules, and taking the idea of alienness to a whole other level. So encountering an alien AI would not only point to our own possible future, but also prompt a strange shift in our worldview. So when Nicholas Copernicus proposed in the 1500s that the Earth was not central in any way to the universe, he set in motion the development of a critical scientific idea that there is nothing cosmically special or significant about us. But meeting an ET-AI, an extraterrestrial artificial intelligence, could turn that realization on its head. If the only intelligence we meet is machine in nature, then we would be special. Now, if we do meet an AI, an alien AI, it probably won't be conscious in the full sense of the word, at least not how we would understand it. We'd probably find ourselves facing something akin to like a savant intelligence, like something that's really good at specific tasks, but otherwise limited in other capacities. So a recent example here on Earth is Google's AlphaGo Master, a system that plays the board game Go, and learned some of its skills by exposure to vast catalogs of human-played games. Within a year of its inception, it began outdoing the world's highest-ranking human Go players. Next came an evolved system called AlphaGo Zero, and in 40 days of trading, without recourse to data from historical games, this new AI made itself even better than its silicon ancestor and better than any living human. Now, yet another variant, Alpha Zero, has taken a mere 24 hours to train itself and beat a modestly trained iteration of AlphaGo Zero, as well as topping other systems at playing both chess and shogi, sometimes known as Japanese chess. So if you read interviews with expert players, you'll see that these machines don't even play like humans. Their strategies are really alien and seemingly unfathomable. These alphas are the epitome of a savant machine, and such AIs, such as the Hope, will help us answer a lot of scientific problems that are presently on the edge of tractability. Researchers behind the alpha systems are already talking about the puzzle of protein folding, which is how chains of amino acids twist and gyrate to fold into structures with essentially biological utility. And the underlying molecular rules are understood, but predicting what a particular recipe will give you is currently extremely difficult. But so it sounds like a job for some type of, AlphaFold Zero AI type of thing. But or you can take other pieces of modern science. Cosmological simulations for climate and weather predictions are all driven by physics phenomena such as gravitation and fluid dynamics, thermodynamics, things like that. Now, computer codes digitize these phenomena, calculating billions of iterations of forces and movements, but these computations are still hemmed in by processor speeds and precision. So deep learning self-taught AIs might turn out to do better as quantitative soothsayers than those intense numerical simulations presently bounded by their comparatively plotting systematic approaches. So a machine's savant intuition might be able to skip across compute cycles, seeing what the answer will be in a probabilistic sense rather than actually reproducing a pixelated version of it. So a machine's savant intuition might be applied to the root process of scientific deduction and discovery itself. So the possibilities are yet to be much explored, but they could be extraordinary. Savant machines could turn out to be simply so useful, so revolutionary in expanding our capacity for discovery and exploration that there's little initial motivation to seek anything fancier. So the idea is maybe alien races have already created this. Maybe that's what we will see, something that's way more advanced than even the aliens themselves. Such as if we develop a type of AI that can do it better than us, that's what we would send out into the cosmos to explore, because we ourselves are finite. We die in 80 or 90 years if we're lucky, if we're really lucky to make it that long. And so there's significant factors that go against what we might want to do exploration-wise. So it's an interesting question. What do you guys think about alien AI? I mean, do you even think it's possible that there's life out there? That's something I've been wondering. I wrote a lot about in Day the Earth Stands Still, even a theological argument that could be made supporting the idea of extraterrestrial life. Not saying I necessarily believe in that. And what we did talk about in the book too is that the ET question, the question of alien life, Derek and I see as completely separate from the UFO alien abduction phenomena. We don't think it's the same thing at all. You don't even have to be Christian to understand this, because there have been researchers like Jacques Vallée who don't look at it from a Christian perspective, but basically admit that it's demonic. It's not extraterrestrial, something from another planet. It's most likely something from another dimension. So we write a lot about that. And again, you can find that at skywatchtvstore.com. But I am interested to know what you think about this alien AI stuff. Leave me a comment in the comment section below. I think it's time to get into some Job. What do you think? So I mentioned it already. We have this new Defender Bible at Skywatch from Defender Publishing. It's the Defender Bible limited edition King James version with expanded Apocrypha. This thing is 5 pounds. It's a thick, it's nice. It's actually looks really good too. It's large print. It's easy to read, and again, it's King James. But I picked a couple of books to read some passages from. A lot of you have been reaching out to me and asking me, because there's kind of 3 areas that I deal a lot in right now, and I'm kind of putting, well, maybe it's 4, and I'm kind of putting a 5th one in there coming up. But Christianity, obviously, politics, science, quantum physics stuff, and weird conspiratorial, fringy kind of stuff, and then now I'm adding psychology onto that. I like just exploring and doing a lot of different things, but still from a solid framework that is Josh Peck. But love it or hate it. But so I've done extensive work in a lot of that. But the most request that I get is about the Christian Bible stuff, which it's easy for me to I work in full-time ministry, so I'm in this stuff every single day, all day, every day, all day. Politics to me is a break. Politics is like a fun break for me, where I get a little bit of, I get to relax a little bit and do something fun, like conservative politics, or human psychology or something. That to me is just kind of fun. So it's easy for me to forget that not everybody lives their lives like that. And so I understand, and I'm glad that you guys are reaching out and talking to me more about what you want, because that's what this whole show is based on. It's based on what you, the audience, wants. And I get requests for that more than anything else. More than Nephilim stuff or Bigfoot stuff or alien stuff, or quantum physics or any of that. More often than not, I get just Bible stuff, just solid Christian theological Bible stuff. I did a video the other day on theoxany, and now this channel is still being shadow banned like crazy. So when I say how many views I got, it's not going to sound impressive, especially since I have 20,000 some odd subscribers. But that video within a day got 600 views, which is not a lot, but for my channel, that is a lot. I'm used to my videos capping out at 100 or 200 if I'm lucky to even get that much. So there's a need for it, and I'm glad that you guys have been reaching out and talking to me about wanting to do that. So I thought, well, how about in every show we just read some from the Bible? And now that we have this Defender Bible, it has the Apocrypha in it. And some people might ask, well, why put the Apocrypha in there? That's not inspired text, which I would agree, it's not. But it's interesting to know what first century Jews were reading at the same time they were reading the same stuff that's in our Bible today, because it helps us understand what their worldview was. Now, it doesn't mean that you can take every letter of the Apocrypha and every word and every phrase as solid God-inspired biblical truth. You can't really do that with that. It's not like the Bible in that capacity. But this helps you get in the head of the culture at the time. It would be like if somebody 1,000 years from now wanted to know about our culture and wanted to know how we viewed the Bible. They might find some writings from some pastors that were drawing analogies from like Star Wars or something like that. So they might think, well, what is Star Wars? So let's look into that. Let's find that. Now, of course, Star Wars isn't true, but it would help them understand from our culture some of the analogies that we might make, or some of the comparisons. It doesn't mean that Star Wars has anything to do with the Bible. Obviously, it doesn't. But you can make comparisons, with stuff like that. Certainly, people have made comparisons with Superman and Jesus. That Superman is kind of a retelling of the Jesus story in a modern American Western culture. So in 1,000 years from now, if somebody wanted to understand that connection, well, they'd have to go and look at what Superman was, and they'd have to learn about that. Doesn't mean that Superman's real. Doesn't mean that any word of the Superman mythos is accurate or correct. But it helps get in the head of our culture, the type of stuff that we watch and we consume and we talk about, movies and books that we might read, stuff like that. So that is what the Apocrypha is to the Bible. It's not divinely inspired text, but it was very relevant in the culture of the time, and it helps us kind of understand some of the other things that are God-inspired, that are written. Because, again, it was written, the Bible was written for everybody in the world for all time. But it was written to a certain culture in a certain time. So the more we know about that culture, the more it helps. Now, I picked Job and Enoch because at first I was just going to do the Apocrypha, but I thought it'd be good to have some, and we are going to do Enoch later in the show, but I thought it would be good to have some balance and have just a good solid Old Testament book. And I picked Job because the common conception is that it's the oldest Old Testament book. It's the oldest book written, in the Bible. Actually, that's not true. Now, don't get upset with me. Just hear me out. And actually, when I say hear me out, I actually mean go and look at what Michael Heiser said about it. And if you don't agree with it, you can complain to him. But sorry to throw you under the bus, Mike. But no, he actually knows way more about this than I do. But he's got an episode of Naked Bible podcast. You should go check it out. and it's the I think it's the authorship and the age or something of the Book of Job. It's a recent episode at the time of this recording, so you should go check it out. But it turns out with Job, the claim that Job is the oldest book in the Bible, we hear a lot, and we just kind of take it for what it is, and we don't really go and look into it. We don't really think to look into it to see if that's even true. Turns out there's really nothing to substantiate that claim. There's really nothing to say that it is. And of course, when we hear something like that, something that we believed for a long time, it's kind of a bummer at first, or we might even be hostile towards it and just want to say, well, no, that's not true. It is what it is. And, anybody who says different, but I would suggest, before complaining about it, or sending a bunch of hateful comments on YouTube, or emails or something, just look into what Mike said in the podcast. It's not very long. It's like an hour long. Look into his sources, because he cites all his sources. He's always really good about that. Look into his sources and then try to refute the sources, and people are going to believe what they believe, but it's interesting. But still, I wanted to take that because it's the same with Enoch. A lot of people say that Enoch is incredibly old, the Book of Enoch, and there's not really a reason to believe that for similar reasons. It's an interesting book for sure, though. I wanted to pick those because they seem to have that in common, and I thought that would be a good place to start. So, and especially today, because I don't have an interview for you. I don't have an interview with anybody, but I wanted to do something special and just do a passage from Job, and then later on we'll do a passage from Enoch. If you're watching the daily video on this, then you can go back and watch the weekly video for the whole thing, or you can wait a few days and maybe at some point I'll put the Enoch one up, or maybe I already have. Sometimes I do these out of order. But so again, this is from the Defender Bible. Now, if you have one, go and grab it, because we'll read through this together. And the Book of Job, I have it bookmarked here, starts on page 596. So page 596. We're just going to start from the beginning. We're going to read some of it. I'm not going to do a whole ton of commentary unless we hit upon something I know. We won't get to it in this one because this is like chapter 40 or something. But when we get to the Leviathan part, I'll talk about that. Like, I'll talk about some stuff that I know, but I'm not going to be real heavy on commentary that I just don't know anything about. I just think it's interesting to just now. If you don't have a copy of this, it is just the King James, so you could even go to BibleGateway.com or Blue Letter Bible. Blue Letter Bible is good because you get the Strong's Concordance with it. You can look up the Hebrew words and stuff. So we're just gonna start and read at least the first chapter. Maybe we'll do 2 chapters, maybe 3. We'll just read till I'm sick of reading, I guess. And after this, if you're watching the weekly video, we're going to talk about the Shroud of Turin next, and how the image apparently seems to be moving, which is weird and something I want to talk about. So that's coming up after this. If you're watching this in the daily video, again, you can find it in the weekly video, or just wait until the daily video comes out. But either way, make sure you subscribe. Okay, the Book of Job, chapter 1. There was a man in the land of Uz, whose name was Job, and that man was perfect and upright, and one that feared God and eschewed evil. And there were born unto him 7 sons and 3 daughters. His substance also was 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, and 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 she-asses, and that meant a different thing back then, and very great household, so that this man was the greatest of all men in the East. It's interesting how different our culture is from ancient culture, just in how we value possessions, what makes a man wealthy, or what makes a man successful. Back then it was like livestock and all this stuff, and today it's like cars and phones and TVs and things like that. It's just, I'm not saying that it's necessarily better or worse. It's just interesting that it's different. Continuing on in verse 4, and his sons went and feasted in their houses, every one his day, and sent and called for their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. And it was so, when the days of their feasting were gone about, that Job sent and sanctified them, and rose up early in the morning, and offered burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, it may be that my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. Thus did Job continually. You know, it's interesting that he did that. I never picked this up before, but it's interesting that he did that, saying that he gave the offering not knowing if possibly, you know, his sons have sinned, or if somebody sinned. You know, we'll do this offering because maybe they did, not because we know that they did, but maybe they did, just in case they did. And you know, I wonder how many times we think of our relationship with God like that. Like, how many times is there a prayer like, you know, Lord, forgive me if I did anything that might have upset you today, or that was wrong, and then teach me, you know, please teach me how that was wrong and why, and give me the motivation to change and be different. You know. That's interesting too, and I never picked up on that before. Continuing on in verse 6, now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them. Now, I will say, when it talks about sons of God there, that's angels. It's Benaiah Elohim in Hebrew. If you're on Blue Letter Bible, you can check that out. But that is angels. That's not human sons of God or anything like that. We're talking about angels here. So, and the Lord said unto Satan, whence comest thou? And Satan answered the Lord and said, from going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it. And the Lord said unto Satan, hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil. Now, in there, I'll say that there are a couple people that have made the claim that it says in the earth, and then that's a hollow earth thing. Well, maybe if you're talking about a spiritual dimension, which I know Justin Falls got a lot of flack. Actually, Justin Falls got to get mad props, because he did this. He did this cover design. His name is in this, even for doing the cover design. But you know, I've interviewed him. He actually works with me at Skywatch. He's a really good friend, and he's gotten a lot of flack because people have said that he did the Hollow Earth Chronicles, and it's like, well, if the Earth were really hollow, then we'd know about it. But a lot of what he talks about is in a spiritual sense, you know, the bowels of the earth. And so some people will draw from that, you know, say, well, Satan was coming in and out, you know, he's in the earth and he's out of the earth, and that's a hollow earth deal. Spiritually, maybe, but again, it says the next line, it says, consider my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth. And we still get in the earth. Now, I don't have Blue Letter Bible open in front of me, but it would be interesting to know if that's the same Hebrew phrase. Maybe I am going to end up doing more commentary than I thought I would. Hopefully that's not annoying. If it is, leave me a comment and let me know, and I will try to keep it to a minimum. Continuing on, we are in verse 9. Then Satan answered the Lord and said, doth Job fear God for naught? Hast not thou made an hedge about him, and about his house, and about all that he hath on every side? Thou hast blessed the work of his hands, and his substance is increased in the land. But put forth thine hand now, and touch all that he hath, and he will curse thee to thy face. So the Lord said unto Satan, behold, all that he hath is in thy power, only upon himself put not forth thine hand. So Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord. So that might be a little confusing with all the Old English. Basically, Satan is like, well, God, the only reason that he loves you so much and he's so great is because you've given him everything. Look, he's got an awesome life, and you've given him all this cool stuff. So God's like, all right, well, we'll take that away. Go ahead, do what you want, Satan. Do what you want to him. Let's see if you're right. Let's just see if you're right. So it's interesting. It's not only a test of Job, but it's a test of Satan too. It's interesting to think about it that way. Verse 13, and there was a day when his sons and his daughters were eating and drinking wine in their eldest brother's house. And there came a messenger unto Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the asses feeding beside them. And the Sabians fell upon them and took them away. Yea, they have slain the servants with the edge of the sword, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. While he was yet speaking, there came also another and said, the fire of God is fallen from heaven and hath burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. It's interesting, that phrase, the fire of God. I wonder if, because we in our 21st century American point of view, we tend to think of everything in literal terms. So we read that and we think God sent a fire to kill those, kill all the animals and stuff. it could have just been lightning, and they might have interpreted it that way, but it still wouldn't have mattered. They didn't have as literal of a view of things in the ancient past that we do today. There were a lot of metaphors, a lot of analogies, a lot of sayings like that meant other things. So it might not be now. I don't know for sure, but it might not be a literal God just decided to kill the animals. It could have been lightning, or it could have been some type of other naturally occurring fire that they interpreted as the fire of God, or it could actually have been a pillar of fire from the Lord. So that's interesting. We don't know. But verse 17, while he was yet speaking, there came also another and said, the Chaldeans made out 3 bands and fell upon the camels and have carried them away, yea, and slain the servants with the edge of the sword, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. While he was yet speaking, there came also another and said, thy sons and thy daughters were eating and drinking wine in their eldest brother's house, and behold, there came a great wind from the wilderness and smote the 4 corners of the house, and it fell upon the young men, and they are dead, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. So Job is clearly having a bad day. He's getting all this news all at once, and all of a sudden his nice orderly world is turned into chaos. It's just all chaotic and different. And if you're watching the weekly video, it's like what we talked about before, how when you have a phone, it's just your phone, but you're ignoring all the complexities that actually make the phone work, because that's what we as humans do. So Job had just his life. It's just his life. And he's ignoring all the little complexities that are going on in it until he doesn't have a choice, because calamity, chaos hits. It's like when you're not comparing it in severity, but it's like when your phone breaks. Now all of a sudden it's not this just perfect one unit that works. Now it's a collection of incredibly complex systems that you don't know how to navigate through and you don't know anything about. It's the same idea here. Again, this is a lot more severe because people are dying and animals are dying and stuff. But it's the same kind of idea. He can't live in his bliss anymore, where just things work. Now everything is impossibly complex, and he's got to navigate that. So it's interesting. So yeah, again, he's having a bad day. Verse 20. Then Job arose and rent his mantle and shaved his head and fell upon the ground and worshipped. And said, naked came I out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return thither. The Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away. Be blessed. Blessed be to the name of the Lord. In all this Job sinned not, nor charged God foolishly. So at least he's able, even though the chaos is hitting, he knows that there's a more powerful God. And he says, okay, well, this is terrible, but it's still God. God is still the one in control over all this. It's not like, it's not like Leviathan, the chaos dragon, had won one over on God, had gotten something over on God. God knew what was going on, and Job trusted him. Now that's going to become harder to do, but Job didn't sin. So chapter 2, again, there was a day when the sons of God, again angels, came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them to present himself before the Lord. And the Lord said unto Satan, from whence comest thou? And Satan answered the Lord, saying, from going to and fro in the earth and walking up and down in it. And the Lord said unto Satan, hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and an upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil, and still he holdeth fast he holdeth fast his integrity, although thou movest me against him to destroy him without cause. And Satan answered the Lord. So maybe it was a fire from the God, because God is telling Satan here, thou movest me against him to destroy him. Now, does that mean that he just removes his hand of protection and the enemy is allowed to come in, or is God actively doing things? So that's an interesting question to consider. Verse 4, chapter 2, verse 4. And Satan answered the Lord and said, skin for skin, yea, all that a man hath will he give for his life. But put forth thine hand now and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will curse thee to thy face. So Satan is like, okay, well, you didn't do enough. If you push it further, he'll curse, because he loves his life more than he loves you. That's basically what Satan is saying here to God. And the Lord said unto Satan, behold, he is in thine hand, but save his life. So he's telling Satan, you can do whatever you want to him, just don't kill him. That's the only thing you can't do, but you can do whatever else you want. So went Satan forth from the presence of the Lord, and smote Job with sore boils from the sole of his foot unto his crown. And he took him a potsherd to scrape himself withal, and he sat down among the ashes, and said his wife unto him. So his wife is speaking to him. Dost thou still retain thine integrity? Curse God and die. So to a really loving wife, right? But it also shows, this woman. And typically we read something like that and we think, wow, what was the matter with her? Well, she just lost all of her kids, or she's probably going to die anyway because her husband can't support her anymore now that there's no livestock. I mean, it was the ancient world. It was a different time where you needed that stuff to even survive, and so it's a different state than like if your TV broke or your cell phone broke or something like that. It's a totally different deal. Plus, all of her kids died. So not excusing it, because obviously, men and women should stand by each other if they're married, but still you can get a little bbit more understanding to where she's coming from. And we typically tend to read over that and think, wow, what a jerk. And that's probably right to a certain point, but I think given the chance, a lot of us would probably be more like Job's wife than we like to think. I think a lot of us, if we were put in a situation that was as dire as that, we might more easily even fall into that mindset of, well, just who cares? Just curse God and die. Just forget the whole thing then, So interesting. Verse 10, but he said unto her, thou speakest as one of the foolish women speaketh. What? Shall we receive good at the hand of God, and shall we not receive evil? In all this did not Job sin with his lips. So he's saying, well, God gave us all these good things, so what? We can't expect bad things to happen to us because God gave us some good things? It's kind of like how you are with your kids. You can give your kids good things. You can teach them good things. But that doesn't mean that accidents aren't going to happen. That doesn't mean that the world isn't going to happen. Now, it's a little bit different because we're not omnipotent. We don't have full control over everything that happens in our kids' lives. But at the same time, to a kid, we do. To your child, if they're young enough, we can do anything. We can lift a house. We can do anything, and surely we can protect them in any situation. So when that fantasy is shattered, and when a child realizes that it doesn't work like that, it's distressing, and that's why it's a good idea to teach your kids. Look, this is why you have to behave and why you got to do good, because I'm not always around. I'm not always there. I can't protect you from literally everything in the world. Bad stuff happens, and I'm going to teach you how you can minimize those. Probably use it in different words that a kid can understand. But it's similar to God, whereas like I think sometimes we have this fantasy of God where we think, God, especially when life is going good, well, life is going good. God is giving good things. God is blessing everything. And then we project that onto the world. God has good things for the world, and he's got good things for this. But then, bam, calamity hits. Maybe your brother dies, or you get cancer, or just some horrible thing happens, and it shatters that fantasy, and it's devastating. And then through that, the only thing you can do in that chaos is to just say, well, okay, God, you got this. But see, it seems like Job didn't have that fantasy. It seems like Job, at least before this, had realized, yeah, things are good, but it doesn't mean they always will be, because that's his response to his wife. Is that what? Should we expect only good things and then no bad things should happen? I mean, that life just does not work that way. We enjoyed good things for a while. Should we not expect bad things to happen too? That's no excuse to curse God. Like, that's a terrible attitude you have. You're like a foolish woman, all these things. And I think we typically, that's a good lesson for us to keep in mind when calamity hits, when chaos enters into our lives. And instead of using that as an excuse to curse God and to fall into that sin of pride, because if you're cursing God, if you're mad at God, you're elevating yourself above God. You know that, right? I mean, you'd have to be, otherwise you'd have no reason to be angry with him. But I think that it speaks to our pride nature as human beings, and we can use chaos. And some of this is unconscious, but I think some of it can be completely recognized. But we tend to use those situations as excuses to fall into the comfort of pride. Maybe that's a way to look at it. A human comfort of pride, because we don't always understand spiritual things. We know spiritual things that we're taught are difficult, and they usually mean sacrifice. They usually mean a lot of things that we don't want to do in the moment, but they are for more reward later, even if it means in eternity, with eternal life and all that. But it gives us an excuse. So, and I think, I think internally we all know we're going to have to answer to God someday for everything we say and everything we do. We know that. I think even atheists know that. I think, but especially us as Christians, we know that. And then so we might think from our human understanding, and again, this is sort of unconsciously, it's like subconsciously, because I don't think we really sit down to take time to think about it. But I think that we know that we're going to have to answer to God. And if things don't work out and then we get mad at God, then we sort of think in the back of our minds, when I stand and face God, I'll just tell him that, well, this thing happened and you did this and you did this and you had you actually see this in atheistic arguments all the time. Christopher Hitchens even talked about this a lot, that and so has Richard Dawkins, that if they were to stand in front of God and have to explain themselves to him, they would project it back onto God and say, well, you did this, you did that, kids get cancer and people die and there's all these horrible things in life. But when you get to that point, it's not going to work that way. I tend to think we will have very little to say. I tend to think that we're going to be so awestruck by the literal awesome holiness and perfection of God that we can't really fully grasp in this life, that we're not going to have any excuses. We might like to think that we will, because we're human now, and the only thing we can kind of compare God to is like a person, like a person, and we would react to a person in that way. But however it's going to be, whatever that experience is actually going to be like, when we actually stand face to face with God, we're not going to have those excuses. I don't even think we're going to want to try to say them. I think it'll just be obvious at that point that it's foolish and it's futile. So Job seemed to understand that before, and that shows a lot of strength in Job, that he seemed to understand that when things were good. And we don't know a lot about Job's early life. We don't know if this was the first time he ever went through calamity or chaos. It seems like it might have been, but we don't really know that. But somehow he was able to learn that lesson in prosperity and when things were going good. That's a big strength. And that's something we should do too. And we can learn a lot from that. When things are going good, that is the time to learn these lessons, because you don't want this stuff to take you by surprise. You don't want to be like Job's wife. You want to be like Job. I am doing a lot of commentary. Okay, so just get rid of my statement from before. Just forget that I said I'm not going to do very much commentary. Just get rid of that. I lied. Forgive me of my sin. I lied to all of you about that. I am going to do a lot of commentary. We'll conclude this after chapter 2, and we'll talk about the Shroud of Turin in the weekly video. If you're watching the daily video, you'll either have to wait for another daily video, or you'll have to go check out the weekly video when it's up. Okay, so where did we leave off? I think we're in verse 11 now. Yes. All right, chapter 2, verse 11. Now, when Job's 3 friends heard of all this evil that was done, that was come upon him, they came everyone from his own place. Eliphaz the Temanite, and Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite, for they had made an appointment together to come to mourn with him and to comfort him. And when they lifted up their eyes afar off and knew him not, they lifted up their voice and wept. And they rent every one his mantle and sprinkled dust upon their heads toward heaven. So they sat down with him upon the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and none spake a word unto him, for they saw his grief was great. Kind of a modern analogy. Now at first, we'll continue on in chapter 3 next time, but at first his friends seem actually pretty nice, and we see later that they're a little sketchy in their theology, but they sort of mean well, but God still rebukes them anyway. We find that out later, but we see that they mourn with him and they're silent with him. We don't typically mourn that way. but sometimes I think we should. In our modern culture, there's a lot of time. Like, okay, when I have like a good friend or a family member who just had somebody die in their life that I didn't know, I don't ever know the right words to say in that situation. I don't ever know, and it's tough. But being silent sometimes is the best thing. I mean, think about personal, and everybody has different personalities, and everybody's a little different. But I know with me, at least, when I've gone through, when I'm going through some type of really difficult thing, unless somebody is willing to present like a solution that'll get me out of it, I don't get a lot out of anything beyond I'm going to pray for you. Sorry you're going through that. But I usually don't want to talk about it. I usually don't. I just want to get through it and then just get through the moment of chaos and then back, learn from it and get back on. Now, when somebody can offer useful advice or a solution, then I want to hear about that. And then maybe that's why Job's friends were silent at first, because maybe they didn't know. And then you find out later that they're almost creating their own theology. We do that as Christians sometimes. When we don't know what to say, we'll start saying things like, well, God has a plan for everything, or all things that God does has a purpose. And we talked about that in Chalk Talk. If I remember right, it was with Justin Fall and Donna Howell. So you can go to youtube.com/Chalk Talk Official and find that episode. Does everything happen for a reason? I think it was called something like that. But we find ourselves saying these things that we've heard before, and then we just kind of say them, but really we're creating our own theology. And we'll see Job's friends do that too, which is interesting. So keep that in mind for next time. All right, moving on. I can't believe that we're only about halfway through this show. I'm going to have to step up the pace. The fun thing about doing this show is there's no time limit. We can just go as long as we want. And again, like I said, I don't have an interview for you today, but so we got another couple of stories. Then we'll get into Enoch, Shroud of Turin. This is interesting. This is interesting to me because I don't know what to do with the Shroud of Turin. I don't know. I think there's good reason to believe it, but there's good reason to not believe it too. And some people bring up the head covering thing, in the Gospels, and then true believers of the Shroud of Turin have answers for that too. And so it's an interesting conversation. I don't know where I am on it, but this at least is somewhat scientific, sort of. At least it appears to be. And I want to look into it more. I am not an expert on the Shroud. I'm not. But I'm interested in hearing experts from both sides. I want to hear from experts who believe the Shroud is, all the Jesus stuff and the resurrection and his light and brilliance projected an image on this. I want to hear from them, but I also want to hear from those who say that it's not like that. And I will say that the ones who say that it's not that it's like some painting or something, I found their arguments to be really weak. And it's not that I'm fully sold on either side. I'm not, but the arguments that it was just like a painting or something like that. There's a lot to that I've personally found to be weak compared to the other side. So I don't know, but I'm still looking into it. It's an interest, but it's not a central point for me. But this is something like completely different. So the person who wrote this article in the American Conservative says, a friend passed on this 50-minute documentary about new findings on the Shroud of Turin. The documentary is from 2008, appears. I haven't been able to find any follow-up on these supposed new findings, so I don't know if they've been disproved or validated. In short, the documentary, based on the work of scientists in Sicily, claims to have made new discoveries about the Shroud based on photogrammetry. I don't know. The science of making distance measurements of surfaces depicted on photographs. So using this technique, a high-resolution imagery and high-resolution imagery, the scientists say they found a number of objects on the body of the man in the shroud, including tefillin, which are small leather boxes containing scripture passages that observant Orthodox Jews wear strapped to their left arm and their heads while praying. Now, even more interesting, the scientists claim that their study has shown that the image on the shroud is not static, but actually depicts slight oscillation. It's moving. It is, they say, like stroboscopic photographs showing slight movements of the figure as intense bursts of energy emanate from his body. And the movements within the shroud image, it's claimed, is much more restricted but still visible. If the image is in fact a glimpse of the moment of Christ's resurrection, then it is more like a kind of video in the first seconds of the resurrection, depicting an oscillating movement of Christ himself. So there's apparently an image that depicts the right hand of the shroud man, but this imaging technique also shows that same hand in a semi-clenched fist. And if the scientist theory is correct, and if the image really is Jesus of Nazareth at the moment of resurrection, then the first thing Jesus did with his hand after returning to life was to make the hand configuration very similar to that Orthodox priests use when they bless, a hand position of great antiquity, derived in part from Greco-Roman hand gestures signifying a particular meaning. And there's a detail of the famous 6th century icon of Christ Pantocrator from the monastery of St. Catherine on Mount Sinai that shows that. It's kind of like, kind of like that. But this documentary does not point this out, but maybe because the scientists are Roman Catholic and they didn't recognize the significance, it could be that. But it's also possible that the shroud man, his hand moved to that position as a coincidence, maybe. But it's exciting to consider the possibility that the shroud man, if he is the resurrected Christ, made as his immediate first act after life returned to his body, a gesture of holy blessing. Now, of course, skepticism can be found on the other side of this, and the author of this article says, now my skepticism of this documentary is twofold. One, in my admittedly limited research, I haven't been able to find anything reproducing these results or even analyzing them independently. Maybe you readers can point me to something. Second, in watching the video, I cannot see in most cases the images that the scientists claim is visible. It is certainly possible that the documentary can't recreate the same detail visible with instruments. It is also likely that an untrained eye can't see what the trained eyes can see. But part of me wonders what extent people are seeing what they want to see. Cards on the table. I do believe, this is again the author of the article, I do believe the Shroud of Turin was the burial cloth of Jesus Christ. Having said that, I don't want to be quick to accept the findings of these scientists, so I am appealing to the widespread readership of this blog for guidance. And I'm going to do the same for this video. So I'm interested to know what you think about this. And if you know anything about this, it's interesting because it has to do with, science, and I'm always interested in that anyway. But the shroud has been something, I'm interested in it, not so much right now that I've been really driven to do a lot of research into it, but it's a point of interest. So I would like to know what you guys think about that, if you've heard about that, and if you have any type of objective evidence that may have come out since that. I mean, it's been 10 years since the documentary, so if the claims aren't true, something should have came out. There has been some mysterious objects detected near the Milky Way's supermassive black hole in the center of our galaxy. So astronomers have discovered several objects at the galactic center that are concealing their true identity behind a smoke screen of dust. They sort of look like gas clouds, but they behave like stars. And at today's American Astronomical Society meeting in Denver, a team of researchers led by UCLA postdoctoral scholar Ann Curillo announced their results, which they obtained using 12 years of data taken from Peck Observatory in Mauna Kea, Hawaii. So this is a quote from Curio. She says, quote, "These compact, dusty, stellar objects move extremely fast and close to our galaxy's supermassive black hole. It's fascinating to watch them move from year to year. How did they get there, and what will they become? They must have an interesting story to tell," end quote. The researchers made their discovery by obtaining spectroscopic measurements of the galactic center's gas dynamics using Keck Observatory's OH suppressing infrared imaging spectrograph, or OSIRIS, aptly named OSIRIS. Yeah, they always give these weird names, you know, like these weird Egyptian names or like Greek mythological names to all the science equipment. It's strange that keeps coming up. Now, Randy Campbell, who is the science operations lead at Keck Observatory, is quoted as saying, quote, "We started this project thinking that if we looked carefully at the complicated structure of gas and dust near the supermassive black hole, we might detect some subtle changes to the shape and velocity. It was quite surprising to detect several objects that have very distinct movements and characteristics that place them in the G object class, or dusty stellar objects," end quote. Astronomers first discovered G objects in the Milky Way's monster black hole more than a decade ago. G1 was first seen in 2004. G2 was discovered in 2012, and both were thought to be gas clouds until they made their closest approach to the supermassive black hole. G1 and G2 somehow managed to survive the black hole's gravitational pull, which can shred gas clouds apart. So UCLA astronomy professor Mark Morris, who's a co-principal investigator and fellow member of UCLA's Galactic Center Orbits Initiative, or GCOI, okay, I don't think that's an Egyptian thing, is quoted as saying, quote, if they were gas clouds, G1 and G2 would not have been able to stay intact. Our view of the G objects is that they are bloated stars that have become so large that the tidal forces exerted by the central black hole can pull matter off of their stellar atmospheres when the stars get close enough, but have a stellar core with enough mass to remain intact. The question is then, why are they so large? So it appears that a lot of energy was dumped into these G objects, causing them to swell up and grow larger than typical stars. And GCOI thinks that these G objects are the result of stellar mergers, where two stars orbiting each other, known as binaries, they crash into each other because of gravitational influences of the giant black hole. Now, over a long period of time, the black hole's gravity alters binary stars' orbits until the duo collides, and the combined object that results from this violent merger could explain where the excess energy has come from. So Morris also is quoted as saying, in the aftermath of such a merger, the resulting single object would be puffed up or distended for a rather long period of time, perhaps a million years, before it settles down and appears like a normal-sized star. Andrea Giaz has said, quote, "This is what I find most exciting." And again, she's the founder and director of GCOI. Quote, "If these objects are indeed binary star systems that may have driven to merge through their interactions with central supermassive black holes, this may provide us with insight into a process which may be responsible for the recently discovered stellar mass black hole mergers that have been detected through gravitational waves." Okay, so why should we care? It's a lot of science stuff, and it is interesting. I mean, if you're into astronomy and stuff like that. But why it matters is, for one thing, it lends more evidence that there actually is a black hole at the center of our galaxy. We don't know that for sure. Well, technically, we don't even know for sure that black holes exist. You know, for absolute sure, there's a high probability of it, but we don't know for absolute sure. No one's been able to observe or measure one. I mean, there would be no way to even do that anyway. But at the same time, it also adds to the mystery of God's creation. You know, why are these being found now, and what significance does it have? What does it mean for just how the galaxy works, or where it's going? So all those big questions could be asked, but it just adds more to God's creation and how interesting it is. Okay, angelic protection. There is a story. I don't mean to laugh, because I actually think this stuff does happen. I mean, it happened in the Bible quite frequently. In the Old Testament, there is a story of an angel that killed an entire army of people, which is a pretty cool story. But it's interesting to think about that this is still going on today. So, maybe, but, the thing is, I don't think we're ever going to find objective proof of it. We're never going to find anything beyond subjective. And I don't think angels, if they do operate in our lives today, I believe they do. But if they do, I don't think they're interested in giving us any objective proof of their existence. I think that's counterintuitive to what God has in plan for us and the gospel and his true children and all of that stuff. So, but I like these stories because I think it's interesting. So there was a story that was put on Charisma News titled "How an Angel Rescued Me from Getting Mugged in a Dark Alley." So it's a personal story of somebody. They write it in the first person, so I'll read it. And so you're going to hear me say I and my and me a lot. I'm not talking about me. It's read in the voice of this person who, if I can find it, Angela Hunt and Bill Myers. So I'm not sure which one of them went through this, but it's a springboard, though, to another conversation that I would like to have, and I would like to know from you, how many of you have had angelic experiences that not just what you think might have been? Well, shoot, you know what? I want to hear about those too. Why, if you had something that might have been an angelic experience, why do you think it might have been? And hey, good angel or bad angel, fallen angel or benevolent angel. Either one. I want to hear about them, and I'd love it if you would leave it in the comment section below if you're interested in writing it out for the rest of us to read. I wrote a chapter in I Predict, which was a collaborative book that Defender Publishing put out a couple years ago. And I wrote a chapter about angelic visitations and how angels will sometimes come and help people, and how I think we're going to be seeing more of that as time goes on. I think we're going to be seeing more, not less, which is strange because you would think that our world is getting more materialistic. It's actually not. I think we've about hit the peak of our materialism. I think people are getting more superstitious if they're not Christian. If they don't convert to Christianity, I think they're getting more superstitious, more spiritual in their interpretations of even scientific things. But despite that, I think that we're going to see more angelic visitations and angels helping people out. If you've had an experience like that, I would love to hear about it. Leave it in the comment section below, or you can email me or message me on Facebook or wherever you're seeing this. Go ahead and leave a comment because I'd love to hear it. But here's this person's story. So again, I'm going to be reading in first person. It's not my story, it's this person's. But one night I stayed late at work. I don't remember why, but I remember it was dark when I left. I walked briskly because the wind was a little cold. I passed the last corner where the crime scene tape ended. I only had one more block to go before I reached the lot where we were allowed to park. A few cars passed on Broadway, but almost everyone was already home. I remained vigilant, just as my parents always taught me. I knew a single female, no matter where she is, could be a target. Okay, so this is probably Angela Hunt. I'm sure this isn't Bill Myers. It's saying, nowadays you never know. But all right, so who's giving the story? But I wasn't scared until suddenly, about 20 yards ahead of me, a man stood blocking my path. I didn't know how he got there. A brick building stood where he could have come out of a doorway, but there was no door. There was not any kind of alleyway or place where he could have hidden. Fear chilled my body. His eyes gleamed with menace, even though he was smiling at me. He wore a heavy brown leather duster, and he flashed it open as though he was showing me he had no weapons. He started to walk toward me, and no one else was around. No car driving by, no people walking to their cars. Even the street lights around us seemed to dim, and I suddenly realized how black the night was. I thought to myself, run, but I did nothing but stand still, frozen in my own shock, watching this man smile at me while feeling no warmth from him at all. Then, like a flash, I saw another man. I thought, where did he come from? There was still nothing but a brick wall ahead. He put his arms out right on the other man's shoulders and said very quietly, "You don't want to do that," as he pushed the man to the wall. All my primal survival instincts came back to me, and I ran. I darted out into the street, moving around the two men who were now just a blur as I passed by them. Then I bolted back onto the sidewalk and ran all the way to the parking lot, but I had to turn. I had to see what was going on behind me. Just one glance, I told myself. Out of breath, I stopped and looked back. There was nothing in that space but an empty sidewalk. The night had gone even quieter. The air was holding its breath. My eyes darted to all the places they could have gone, but the only escape was across the street, and there was no one there. I was too scared to investigate any further, so I went to my car. I sat there for a little while, breathing hard, remembering that man's eyes. I never saw the face of the other man. His back was to me, but his voice was so calm. As I drove off into the night, I believed with every part of my being that I had seen my very first angel. What the other man was, who could know? Okay, so, and, what do you do with an account like that? I'm glad Okay, so and just to give credit where credit's due, Angela Hunt and Bill Myers are best-selling authors of dozens of books like When God Happens from Salem Books, which is available online wherever fine books are sold. Deborah, Esther, and Anna carried a profound anointing, became a godly woman of boldness, power, and strength. Get the anointing bundle, and then there's other things at Charisma News if you're into that kind of stuff. But with this account, again, it's the Mulder and Scully thing. I want to believe, but I'm so skeptical because it could have just been a nice guy. And even though this person believes she saw an angel, there's no way for us to know. And maybe that's the point. Maybe that's the point, because I do believe in angelic visitations. I do believe that angels will help people from time to time. I even believe in guardian angels. But maybe the point is not, maybe the point is a greater call, a greater purpose than to just prove to us that they exist. The greater purpose is to help, to be helpful in any way that God deems necessary. And if it's a totally subjective experience, which, of course, this person can't prove that any of this happened. I've had spiritual experiences that I've talked about on this channel that I cannot prove to you ever happened, but like her, I fully believe to the core of my being that they were real and that they were real spiritual encounters with God and with a spiritual realm that I have no way to fully really understand at all. I do think that happens, but I don't think the point is to prove the existence of the spiritual world in an objective sense to a extremely literal, materialistic, and scientific culture. I don't think that's the point at all. If they have a purpose, if they have a godly purpose, it would be something out of great humbleness, humility, because they wouldn't have pride. I mean, that was the fall of Satan. That's the fallen angels. They fall into pride. So they would have no real motivation to want to be known or seen or believed in. The only motivation they would have is to help in the way that God wants them to help. So in this case, if this was a true account, I could see if this was an angel. I'm not even saying I believe the account happened. Her interpretation of it, I'm not sure about. But let's say, just for sake of argument, that it was an angel. The angel in question would have no motivation whatsoever to prove to the woman that it was a real angel. The angel's purpose at that point would have been to stop this woman from being hurt in some way. And it did that. And the angel doesn't have to do anything extra in order to do that. The woman doesn't ever really need to know if it was an angel in order to do that. We don't need to know if it was an angel in order for that to happen. And again, obedient, benevolent angels aren't going to have any pride in them. Pride is sinful, and we know what happens to angels when they get prideful. They get cast out, they're done. So it would make sense if angels do exist and if they do help, they would not have they wouldn't have a real interest. Not that they would be antagonistic to it, but they wouldn't have a real interest in proving themselves to us that they exist. It would think of it this way. Do you feel compelled to prove to a dog that you exist? Like let's say you see a dog that's about to get hit by a car, and you run out in the middle of the street, you stop the car, save the dog. Do you then go and take the dog and then sit him down and you try to explain to him that you actually exist and you're a human and he's a dog and you're above him, and you already know he's not going to understand what you're talking about? The only thing that you can get across is that you can pet him. You can pet him and then he knows you're nice, and that's about as far as you can get. I don't think that's a perfect one-to-one analogy, but maybe it's something like that, where the immediate purpose, like for you, would be saving the dog. The immediate purpose is not for the dog to even care anything about you. It's to save the dog. It would be the same for, or it doesn't even have to be a dog. You could use like a baby or something, like a kid. A kid runs out in the street and you run and grab it and save the kid before it gets hit by a car. Now, do you want to develop a relationship with that kid and make sure the kid really gets to know you? At that point, it doesn't matter. No, you're just happy to get on with your life, and the kid is saved, the kid is fine, and you say, okay, we'll go home and don't run out in the street next time, and that's about it. you don't have any interest in the kid knowing a whole lot about you because it doesn't matter. Your immediate purpose at that time was to save the kid from danger. I think it's something similar to that with angels, and I think that's why they don't really seem interested in proving themselves to us, because it doesn't matter to their purpose. Now, at some point in the prophetic timeline, it might matter. There's going to be times where angels might have to manifest in an objective way. And, you know, it depends on how you interpret books like Revelation and things like that. But there might be that might happen. But at least for right now, that's not always the case. So interesting story. I'd love to know what you think. Okay, we're gonna do one more about aliens and Trump, and then we're gonna get into the Book of Enoch. And yeah, it's exciting stuff. So, and listen, I really would love your feedback. Email me or send me comments, or you know, I want your feedback on these. To me, I don't know that I would ever want to do a show that's any longer than this. You know, once a week. This is actually turning out to be pretty long. But again, if you guys like it, I mean, I'll keep doing it. It's your guys' show. I'm just the host. That's the way I look at it. But I really want to know your feedback. What do you like? What don't you like? So, you know, this question has come up. You know, has Donald Trump been briefed on UFOs? And why are these UFOs classified as above top secret with defense implications? Now, this is something else that me and Derek wrote about, because part of the book, The Day the Earth Stands Still, that Derek and I wrote together, I wrote about the possibility of official disclosure in a Trump presidency. And I was drawing on Richard Dolan's work. He actually wrote a book. I think it was that exact title or something like that. Richard Dolan got into that. Fun piece of trivia, Richard Dolan and I share the same birthday, July 1st. And he'll be at the True Legends Conference in Branson, Missouri, coming up later this year in September, I believe. If you haven't had a chance, go to gen6.com to get your tickets or to get live streaming. But he wrote about it, which was interesting. And so this question has come up. Now, is there a level of ultra top secret security above the President of the United States when it comes to UFOs? A lot of people think so, and certainly President Donald Trump, after at the time of this recording, 500 days in office, you would think that he's been briefed about UFOs from NASA, the CIA, maybe others, but then again, maybe not. You know, we don't know. And this question is intriguing, and it's not stretching reality. I mean, are there secrets from out there in the cosmos that demand such secrecy? You know, maybe so, but why? With all the Star Wars movies going back decades, dozens of science fiction films featuring extraterrestrial visitors from outer space, you know, within or beyond our own Milky Way galaxy. What is there now to hide from the public? If the government did reveal that UFOs were real, you know, so what? Regardless if we know that they're here, there are no answers as to why UFOs are here, but they are here. And again, as we wrote about in The Day the Earth Stands Still, we believe, Derek Gilbert and I believe, that those two things are separate phenomena. The idea of life out there in the universe, well, I guess it would be a phenomenon, but just the question of life in the universe, and then the UFO and alien abduction phenomena, we think are totally different, and we explain why in the book. And we've done so in interviews that you can find for free online too. But other countries like Great Britain and Russia, they've actually released their once top secret UFO files for public consumption that leave no doubt about the true existence of UFOs. Now, what they are, who knows? But there's something going on. There's something larger. There's some mysterious thing that's happening. Now, what will it take for President Trump to unexpectedly land Air Force One at the infamous and secretive Area 51 in the Nevada desert and demand a full facility inspection from top to bottom and wall to wall? You know, there are those that believe Area 51 contains actual captured or crashed UFOs. And I'll say, I think we have a greater I don't know. I don't think we're ever going to get full disclosure, but I think we have a greater chance of it in a Trump presidency than we would in a Hillary Clinton presidency. But one revealing statement from former President George H.W. Bush when asked about the existence of UFOs, he said, "You don't know the half of it." That's a quote. Now, in 2016, a tourist in Costa Rica captured amazingly clear photos of a UFO hovering above Arazu Volcano National Park in Cartago, and the pictures were sent to MUFON for analysis, as reported in the Costa Rica Star News. Now, maybe the most famous UFO sighting in Costa Rica took place in September 4th of 1971. The Costa Rican National Geographic Institute was taking aerial photos from 10,000 feet of Lake Cote, which is a small body of water that would later become the larger Lake Arenal, is part of preliminary studies for a future hydroelectric project. I'm getting too excited. I'm talking a little too fast. But some experts say that this is the best UFO photograph in the world, and you can go check that out online. Now, it's well known that former President Jimmy Carter witnessed unexplained aerial phenomena in Leary, Georgia in 1969, 2 years before becoming governor of Georgia. And he was speaking to a Lions Club group about 7:15 p.m. when someone that noticed the strange light in the sky about 30 degrees above the horizon spoke up and pointed it out to the 20 or so people that saw the UFO. And here's a direct quote. All of a sudden, quote, all of a sudden, one of the men looked up and said, "Look, over in the west." And there was a bright light in the sky. We all saw it. And then the light, it got closer and closer to us, and then it stopped. I don't know how far away, but it stopped beyond the pine trees. And all of a sudden, it changed color to blue, and then it changed to red, and then back to white. And we were trying to figure out what in the world it could be. And then it receded into the distance. This is a direct quote from President Carter, and he said this in an interview about the sighting. Continuing on, one thing's for sure, I'll never make fun of people who say they've seen unidentified objects in the sky. If I become president, I'll make every piece of information this country has about UFO sightings available to the public and the scientists. Of course, that never happens. A lot of presidents have said that in their run for election, and it never happens. Even Hillary Clinton said that, and nobody believed her. I mean, Bill Clinton didn't do it. He said he would. Hillary Clinton didn't do it either. Now, at least President Trump, I don't even think he ever even commented on it. So at least he didn't say it and then not do it. Now, according to an account published in Wikipedia, despite his earlier pledge, once elected, Carter distanced himself from disclosure, citing defense implications as behind his decision. So what does that mean? Defense implications, from what and why? I mean, that's the great unknown, and the public should be briefed about what is known about UFOs, some would say. Now, I believe that if it is something our government is doing and we don't want our enemies to know, then we don't need to know. Fine. But they could at least just say, look, we got stuff, we're working on it, but there are times where maybe the alien cover-up story would be helpful to the government if they're doing something nefarious. Some people... and we wrote about it in the book, but some people think that Roswell might be something like that the government was actually testing something on kids with progeria or something like that. And to escape public outcry on these horrific experiments, they led the country to believe that it was aliens. Yeah, maybe not. So we kind of dealt in both sides of that question in The Day the Earth Stands Still. But it's interesting to think about. So, there are reasons on both sides of the aisle why the government might not want to say anything about aliens. Now, the late astronaut Gordon Cooper, who he was one of the original Mercury 7 astronauts, he gave an interview before he died in which he described witnessing and filming a UFO landing in Germany and taking off. Cooper said that he had the film developed, but before he could view the film, it was seized by the government officials, sent to Washington, and never heard from again. So he said that he did hold the film up and it contained close-up images of the UFO, but Cooper never again heard anything about the film footage that he captured. And in his interview, this man was honest. He was beyond reproach, and he, was brave for coming forward, according to those who believe his testimony. Commercial airline and military pilots from around the world have described seeing UFOs and photographing them, but many keep their sightings secret because they fear ridicule, and of course, who wouldn't? But again, what's the big deal with all the secrecy, some might ask, and continual lies and deception from the U.S. government involving what they know about the existence of UFOs, some might ask, if they know anything at all. What's scary is the level of top secret that goes higher than the President of the United States might actually exist. What's even scarier is there might be an aerial phenomenon that maybe the government doesn't really know what it is. Maybe they don't know any more than we do. Maybe they have some extra video or something, but maybe they don't know. Now, back in 1977, President Carter asked the then CIA director, George H.W. Bush, to disclose CIA information on UFOs, and was told directly by Bush, quote, "You have no need to know," end quote. And that was the end of it. So, kind of scary. And President Trump, according to some, should demand public disclosure of everything the government knows about UFOs. Some believe that they do know what's out there, but the public doesn't, and we're not alone in the infinite universe. So some people believe that. Now, that's why I say if any president was going to do that, it would be Trump. I don't see Obama doing that. I don't see Clinton, either of the Clintons, doing that. If there was going to be one that would, I think it would be Trump. And if there was going to be one that could accomplish it, I think it would be him. But still, I don't think it's going to happen. I think he has more important things to worry about. All right. But again, I would like to know your thoughts. So leave me a comment in the comment section below. So let's get into Enoch. Let's read from the Enoch, book of Enoch. And again, this comes from the Defender Bible, limited edition, King James Version with expanded Apocrypha. Absolutely beautiful book. Now, if you're watching this as a daily video and might wonder, well, why the Apocrypha? Why is that included? You can go back into the weekly video. And if this is posted after that, but you can go back into the weekly video that contains this daily video. You can go back in there and find out the reason why. I don't want to rehash it for people who are watching the weekly video. You don't need to hear the same thing twice. Okay, so, this is really cool. Look at this type, the Apocrypha. I'll hold that up so you can see it. It's really nice type. It's big. It's easy to read. But I want to start with the introduction that actually came from Tom Horn. Weird calling him my boss. I mean, technically he is my boss, but he's I don't know. He's kind of more like a dad. But I don't want to get into the mushy stuff. Okay. But here's an introduction that kind of explains why the Apocrypha, why the Book of Enoch, how do we view it, all that stuff that you might be wondering. So I didn't read that before, but I'm going to read it now. So this is the introduction by Dr. Thomas Horn. It says, "The Bible as we hold it today is esteemed by many religious institutions and especially conservative Christians to be the inspired, inerrant Word of God. This doctrinal position affirms that the Bible is unlike all other books or collections of works in that it is free of error due to having been given by inspiration of God and is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness, that the man of God may be perfect, thoroughly furnished unto all good works." And that's 2 Timothy 3:16 and 17. While no other text can claim this same unique authority, apocryphal and pseudepigraphical literature such as contained in this section provides literature that often precedes or follows the chronology of biblical texts, which frequently are used or assigned as supplemental works within academic settings to help students and scholars discover or better understand cultural and historical context within the Word of God. Whether or not the information contained in the apocryphal literature is entirely precise, as is the canon of Scripture, these ancient texts provide commentators valuable insight into what many ancient Jews and early Christians believed when, quote from Hebrew 1:1, "God, who at sundry times and in diverse manners spake in time past unto the fathers by the prophets." End quote. These apocrypha are therefore intended to be a supplemental resource for assisting serious researchers and students in the study of the Bible and Bible times. Contained in this section, the Book of Enoch, the Book of Jasher, the Book of Jubilees, First Esdras, Second Esdras, First Maccabees, Second Maccabees, Tobias, Judith, Wisdom, Sirach, Baruch, Susanna, Prayer of Azariah, Prayer of Manasseh, Balaam the Dragon, that's a cool one, and Laodiceans. All right, so that is the introduction, and I wanted to make sure to read that because it explains why we're going to continue on with this, and as we talked about before. Now, the Book of Enoch, this version is just the best you can get. I mean, there's a lot of online versions that will twist things around, or they'll put things in there that aren't originally in there. Tom took great care to actually get a reliable source. So this was translated by R.H. Charles D. Litt from London Society for Promoting Christian Knowledge in 1917. So we'll just start. Just like the Job passage, I don't know how much commentary I'm going to provide. We'll see. It'll be an adventure for us all. So again, if you have your limited edition Defender Bible, go ahead and pick it up. Now, the page numbers start over again with the Apocrypha. So it's technically page, what would this be? Page 5, but in the Apocrypha. So the page numbers start over again after the Old and New Testaments. All right. Chapter 1, the words of the blessing of Enoch, wherewith he blessed the elect and righteous, who will be living in the days of tribulation, when all the wicked and godless are to be removed. Now, that's an interesting way to open it, because it's written to those who are living in the day of tribulation, as it says. Now, many have said that that's where we are now. Maybe where we are now, maybe a little bit into the future, but if that's who this is written to, we should be able to understand it in those contexts. But again, we have to understand what the writer was thinking at the time. So that helps in the context, the historical context for the writing. So verse 2, and he took up his parable and said, Enoch, a righteous man whose eyes were opened by God, saw the vision of the Holy One in the heavens, which the angel showed me, and from then I heard everything, and from them I understood as I saw, but not for this generation, but for a remote one, which is for to come. So in the future. Concerning the elect, I said, and took up my parable concerning them. The Holy Great One will come forth from his dwelling, and the eternal God will tread upon the earth, even on Mount Sinai, and appear from his camp, and appear in the strength of his might from the heaven of heavens. And all shall be smitten with fear, and the watchers shall quake, and the fear and trembling shall seize them unto the ends of the earth. And the high mountains shall be shaken, and the high hills shall be made low, and shall melt like wax before the flame. And the earth shall be wholly rent in sunder, and all that is upon the earth shall perish. And there shall be a judgment upon all men. But with the righteous he will make peace, and will protect the elect. And mercy shall be upon them, and they shall all belong to God, and they shall be prospered, and they shall be all blessed. And he will help them all, and light shall appear unto them, and he will make peace with them. And behold, he cometh with 10,000s of his holy ones, to execute judgment upon all, and to destroy all the ungodly, and to convict all flesh of all the works of their ungodliness, which they have ungodly committed, and of all the hard things which ungodly sinners have spoken against him. Now, that might sound familiar. We actually get that in the book of... it's a really short book, and now I'm Jude. I was blanking on it. Book of Jude. We actually see the Book of Enoch quoted in certain places. Jude, that's where that just came from, all the ungodly stuff. We also get it from... 2 Peter, I believe, quotes Enoch as well. Okay, so continuing on in chapter 2. Observe ye everything that takes place in the heaven, how they do not change their orbits, and the luminaries which are in the heaven, how they all rise and set in order, each in its season, and transgress not against their appointed order. Behold ye the earth, and give heed to the things which take place upon it from first to last, how steadfast they are, how none of the things upon earth change, but all the works of God appear to you. Behold, the summer and the winter, how the whole earth is filled with water, and clouds and dew and rain lie upon it. Chapter 3, a very short chapter. It's only one verse. Observe and see how in the winter all the trees seem as though they had withered and shed all their leaves, except 14 trees, which do not lose their foliage, but retain the old foliage from 2 or 3 years till the new comes. All right, chapter 4. And again, observe ye the days of summer, how the sun is above the earth over against it, and you seek shade and shelter by reason of the heat of the sun. And the earth also burns with growing heat, and so you cannot tread on the earth or on a rock by reason of its heat. Chapter 5, observe ye how the trees cover themselves with green leaves and bear fruit. Wherefore give ye heed, and know with regard to all his works, and recognize how he that liveth forever hath made them so. And all his works go on thus from year to year forever, and all the tasks which they accomplish for him, and their tasks change not, but according as God hath ordained, so it is done. And behold how the sea and the rivers in like manner accomplish, and change not their tasks from his commandments. But ye have not been steadfast, nor done the commandments of the Lord, but ye have turned away and spoken proud and hard words with your impure mouths against his greatness. O ye hard-hearted, ye shall find no peace. Therefore shall ye execrate your days, and the years of your life shall perish, and the years of your destruction shall be multiplied in eternal execration, and ye shall find no mercy. In those days ye shall make your names an eternal execration unto all the righteous, and by you shall all who curse, and all the sinners and godless shall imprecate you. And for you, the godless, there shall be a curse. And all the something, we're missing something. And that happens, that happens sometimes in these translations. Sometimes in the scroll you miss something. But it says, and the something shall rejoice. And there shall be forgiveness of sins, and every mercy and peace and forbearance. There shall be salvation unto them, a goodly light. And for all of you sinners there shall be no salvation, but on you all shall abide a curse. But for the elect there shall be light and joy and peace, and they shall inherit the earth. And then there shall be bestowed upon the elect wisdom, and they shall all live and never again sin, either through ungodliness or through pride. But they who are wise shall be humble, and they shall not again transgress. Nor shall they sin all the days of their life, nor shall they die of the divine anger or wrath, but they shall complete the number of the days of their life, and their lives shall be increased in peace, and the years of their joy shall be multiplied in eternal gladness and peace all the days of their life. We'll continue next time in chapter 6, because that gets into the Watchers, Giants, Nephilim, all of that stuff. But that's a really good introduction. Exactly who this is for, and how at the time that the writer is thinking, it's like the world is split into two types of people, which is kind of how we think of it. I think we Christians kind of think of it that way today. It's split into two types of people. You basically have Christians and non-Christians. The Christians, none of us are perfect, but Christians you can kind of work with. I mean, even in Scripture, Paul tells us that we're supposed to judge one another within the church, but the outside world we leave judgment to God. And that's a whole big idea that we don't have time to get into today. But it seems like that's where the writer of Enoch, of the book of Enoch, is at this point in life. It's that divide is great. And for those who reject God, it's bad news. But we can take hope that for those who are following God and are righteous, then we only have good things coming to us. But it doesn't mean that times are always going to be easy. Times are still going to be tough. So we'll continue on next week. We'll continue on with more of Job. We'll continue on more in Enoch. Again, if you're watching this on a daily video, make sure you watch the weekly video where you get all of these. And if you're watching the weekly video, hey, share the daily videos around. Not everybody is going to be up for a 2-hour weekly video, 2 or 3 hour weekly video. I get that. That's why I do the daily videos. I take sections from the weekly videos and put them out. Share those around because it just helps. And if you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe, you click the bell, you tell YouTube that you want to be notified, follow me on Steemit. I'll actually put up a commercial. Commercial's the wrong word. I'm going to put up a video in a minute here that can show you how you can help, how you can get involved, how you can get connected to Josh Peck Disclosure and social media, because it's almost guaranteed that our days on YouTube are numbered. really for any of us, but I just talk about too many things that YouTube doesn't like on this channel. That's why we see the shadow banning. That's why I have over 20,000 subscribers, yet not even 1,000 people are allowed to watch my videos. And I know, like I've said before, I know there's more of you out there. Blog Talk, podcast, server is a little bit better with it. As far as I know, I don't think that they're banning anything, but those episodes I'll get over 1,000 listens. But more people would rather watch a video than listen to a podcast. But I know that there's a lot of people that like podcasts, so that's why I make that available. All that stuff is available at joshpeckdisclosure.com. So if and when the day comes where just this channel is gone because YouTube has deleted it, it happened to Tim Alberino. It very well could happen here. I'm very pro-Trump. I'm very conservative. I'm extremely Christian. I love Jesus, guns, and the Bible. So it's very likely that this channel, I can't believe we've made it this long. It's very likely it's going to get deleted. If and when that happens, this is the plan. This is what you do. You just go to Josh Peck Disclosure. As soon as I find out about it, I will put instructions there, and we will continue doing these videos. I will find some other platform. If I have to do it, I will upload videos to the website so you can download them and just have them. And then if you want to distribute them on DVDs or put them online somewhere, that's fine. That's great. I would love for you to do that. I'm not one of these guys that's like, oh no, you don't steal my stuff. I am like that when it comes to my actual YouTube channel, when like some fake Russian channel wants to take videos and then monetize it and make a whole bunch of money when I can't rely on it for a revenue stream. That I do get upset about because they're not doing it to spread the gospel. They're doing it to make themselves money on work that they didn't accomplish. But for you guys, you can share this around, and that's fine. And if it gets to the point where this channel is gone, then I'm going to want you guys to put it on your own channels if you can. If you don't want to take the risk, understandable, but if you can, that would be great. Okay, but we will deal with that day when it comes. At least it is not today because you're watching this. So, all right, send me your feedback. I really want to know what you think. The last weekly video that I did only got a couple hundred views. I know... I don't believe that it's because of you guys. I think it's because of YouTube, because I don't get that many negative comments. But listen, if you hate the show or if there's something you don't like about it, but you would watch it if something were changed, let me know what that is. And that helps me. If you like the show, tell me what you like about it. If there are things that you would rather have not happen or things that you would rather be different, let me know what those things are. Now, again, I'm filming this from my bedroom right now because of my knee injury. Hopefully soon I'll be able to make it down to the basement where I have a better studio set up and we'll be able to do the 2 camera angles and edit this a little bit better. But, for now, I thank you all so much for sticking with me. This has been a lot of fun. I think this has been a good episode. I want to know what you think. If you'd rather, you can email me at joshpeckdisclosure@gmail.com or just leave a comment here or on Facebook or on Twitter at JPDisclosure. And also, Patreon is important. Donations are important. joshpeckdisclosure.com. And that information is coming in just a second. So, all right. Thank you all so much. I love you all. Thank you for your support, your prayers, your encouragement, just everything that you guys are, even your criticisms. Really appreciate it and love you guys. Till next time. Take care and God bless. You can help fight against censorship by making a one-time donation or setting up a monthly donation to Josh Peck Disclosure at joshpeckdisclosure.com/donate. Or for as little as $1 a month, you can become a Peck patron by heading over to patreon.com/joshpeck. As a Peck patron, you will be entered into contests to have your content featured on the Josh Peck Disclosure homepage, contribute chapters to a collaborative book with Josh Peck, and win a special Josh Peck collection full of materials worth hundreds of dollars. Also, for as little as $3 a month, you will have access to free downloads of Josh Peck books, such as Quantum Creation, Cherubim Chariots, and more. Josh Peck Disclosure is viewer funded. Head on over to joshpeckdisclosure.com for more information. Right now, head on over to joshpeckdisclosure.com, the central hub for everything Josh Peck Disclosure. Every day you'll get brand new videos, podcast updates, and more. Make sure you subscribe at youtube.com/joshpeckdisclosure. Also, make sure you click the bell and select the option to always be notified when a new video is released. Follow Josh Peck Disclosure on Twitter at JP Disclosure and get involved with the show on our official Facebook page at facebook.com/JoshPeckDisclosure. If you're on Steemit and prefer DTube, follow Josh Peck at steemit.com/@JoshPeck and make sure to upvote all Josh Peck Disclosure DTube videos. Keep checking back at joshpeckdisclosure.com for news, information, updates, and more.